For me personally, when we're talking about infidelity, and then let's say the person who's unfortunately been cheated on, right? And to what you were saying, I oftentimes kind of pause and I listen to people, and I always think to myself, as you mentioned, why is the first conclusion it has something to do with you, that you've done something wrong? Because for me personally, again, that kind of goes back into my thinking of what is it that you think about yourself and feel about yourself, or what do you feel and think about yourself in the context of this relationship? As in, like, do you feel as though you haven't done enough? Do you feel as though you're doing too much? Because me personally, actually, I'm not gonna lie. Me personally, years ago, I probably would have been like, damn, what am I doing wrong? But me now, if it's a situation of dealing with infidelity, it's more so a case of, well, damn, what you got going on?
That's fair.
Because I don't view it as just a case of, like, I'm this awful person unless I know I've actually shown up as an awful person. But more so I kind of view, like, okay, there's something going on. I just want to get an understanding of, like, what that is.
I was stuck because I see nothing wrong with what you said. Like, a lot of people think it's them. They'll be like, what am I doing wrong? Sometimes it's not you. It's just them. It's just that they want to go out and sleep with people. It's not that you could do more or less of anything. It's one of those things where it's like they're just out there looking for that stimulation. Sex is a powerful thing. It's a real drug. I had a client, they came in to therapy session, and I was explaining to them why you get overwhelmed. They came in a therapy session, they was like, Dr. B, why is sex such a powerful motivator? I was like, it is. You're getting all that dopamine. All that dopamine that turns into adrenaline. Because the context was this. The client was like, I knew I shouldn't go over there. It's never turns into anything good. But the sex really is good for that person. So if you put that in the context of, like, cheating, that's why I say that there are times where it's like, it's not to what you were saying, it's not a you thing. It's a them thing at that point. Because you're being driven by the excitement of it caused by the dopamine. And then all of a sudden, when the excitement kicks in, you start coming up with the plan. Dopamine turns into adrenaline. Now you're motivated to go and do it. So I say that to say this. To your point, it ain't always a you thing. It can be a you thing. Because I have another client where their partner will, talk to them a little reckless. Like in the past, they talked to them very reckless. And one thing that I could tell you, that people are not punching bags.
That part.
They're not punching bags. If you keep berating them, if you keep talking negative to them, if you're not pouring into them, they're very susceptible to the other person that will. The other person that's talking to them,
that's true,
that's pouring into them, that's telling them all the positive things. There are times where, yes, it is something. Let me be careful how I say that. There are times where it's a hard question to ask in therapy.
Yeah.
What are all the factors that contributed to the infidelity?
Yeah.
Because the person who was cheated on tends to be, I didn't do anything wrong. That person cheated. They should have never cheated on me. And then it's always a rough thing to bring up when they're not paying attention to when that person that cheated is like, well, and I'm going to stick to the context of the example I gave. You were talking to me like this. You kept doing this to me. You kept doing that to me. You weren't doing this for me. And then, of course, like we were talking about before, people, well, why didn't you just leave? Because they love you. They didn't want to leave you. They just wanted you to change. And you didn't want to change. So they found somebody else to fill the void. I'm not saying it's okay. And the reason why I want everybody to know, the reason why I have this smile on my face is because I'm often finding myself explaining to women that when a man cheats sometimes, it's not that he really likes that other woman that much. It's just that they like access to having sex to that person. It's not, women will create sometimes this grand idea of she's replacing me, she's more pretty than me, she's all this other stuff. She might not even be a fraction of what you are. It's just that men tend to just want to go out and have sex sometimes. That's why I keep smiling when I say it, because I find that my female clients and women in my life, it's a difficult thing to kind of wrap their mind around a little bit, that it can't just be that. Because when I talk to my male clients, heck, we even talked to the producer. What I say, he was like, "Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense." Yeah, sometimes it's just that. It's just the sex.
I will say this. One thing that doing therapy has taught me is that when it comes to infidelity, I've just gotten to this place where it's kind of like, okay, I have to listen to the situation on the merits of the situation. Because in working with clients who've experienced that, whether it's in couples therapy or whether it's just single clients who've broken up and they're processing that, is that when we're talking about infidelity, male or female, it's always a variety of different reasons as to why that happens. As in, I was looking for connection because tragedy occurred. My partner wasn't available to me. The physical intimacy has been lackluster, so I went out and sought something new or something different. It's a situation where my partner hasn't been very supportive and nurturing to me, so therefore, I was getting attention and nurturing elsewhere. It really becomes this exploration into, exploration into it being difficult to the work that required to actually be with someone in a monogamous or committed relationship. Yeah. But then two, how when we're not paying attention, it's so easy for one person or both parties to get into a place where like their feelings or their needs aren't getting met. And then it becomes like the infidelity in itself becomes a huge wake up call, not just in the sense of like, oh my gosh, our relationship is in this this state of threat or danger, but also becomes a wake up call in regards to who we are as individuals because of this. As in, who am I now that I've been faced with the fact that my partner has cheated? And what does that say about me? What do I want that to say about me? Should that say anything about me at all? And what do I want? As a person who may have cheated, where am I in my life to where as though like I have this committed relationship, but I'm also engaging in an extramarital or extra relationship? And what does that say about me in my current state and what it is I'm looking for or whatever it is I'm trying to work through? And when couples come in because of infidelity, I always say, look, there's two things are going to be worked on here. One, the overall relationship, but then two, there's like individual components to this too that you guys have to kind of exercise, because this is that wake up call that has you guys not just looking at each other, but also looking at yourselves, because something that neither one of you wanted to be introduced into the relationship, or only maybe on one side didn't necessarily want to make it known in the relationship, are now facing it. And what does that say about us, or what would you want to say about us, both as a couple, but also as individuals?
No, I can see that. When you were saying those things, it made me think of a couple things as you were saying it, right? Like I realized that one element that comes into play is that and we might have talked about this a couple seasons ago.
We probably have.
When you're not used to being in a peaceful relationship that doesn't have like all the highs and lows of a toxic relationship, a lot of times people are understimulated and they feel bored and they will self-sabotage. I find that to be another layer in this whole equation, because people will pray for a healthy relationship but don't know how to maintain a healthy relationship.
Bingo.
Because a lot of times people are so used to like toxic relationships. Like everybody like the highs and lows of, are they going to be where they're supposed to be? Are they with who they're supposed to be with? It can be fun to people because it's like an overstimulation for whatever, good and negative.
Yeah.
Highs, happy moments, lows, negative moments, but it's always stimulation coming in, to where if you're not used to being peaceful and you enter into a peaceful relationship, people tend to struggle with that sometimes. Like they'll get into a peaceful relationship, be like, they're everything I wanted. They're really, really good people. They do this, they do that. I'm just bored. Yeah, because potentially, not everybody, but some people struggle with it because they're not used to it being calm. The person being where they're supposed to be, doing what they're supposed to do. Then they'll start self-sabotaging, or they'll start second guessing, like, I don't feel anything. I'm not feeling, like I know I love them, but I'm not feeling any like passion, or passion's a little different, but I'm not feeling any emotional reaction to anything.
You said something in the beginning part that really kind of had me thinking in regards to if you're used to just being in a toxic relationship, the ups and the downs. And it made me think about the fact that one of the things, and I'll speak to American culture, one of the things we have the tendency of doing is we kind of have the tendency of kind of normalizing unhealthy relationships, as in like, everybody shouts and gets into arguments, which people do get into disagreements.
It's all over social media.
Exactly. The way we talk about it, it's kind of like, why are we normalizing unhealthy behaviors? And I don't want to, and I want to put a caveat out there. I don't want to shame anybody if you've ever engaged in dialogue that was destructive, or if you raised your voice or anything like that, because I can understand 1,000% your emotions get the best of you, and no one should feel guilty about having emotional responses. It's just is what it is. But the fact that the way we have a dialogue about it, right? As in, like, the way we talk about it, it makes me often think to myself, I should say, I feel like we kind of don't know what love is unless we're also experiencing some sort of tragedy that comes along with it. And I feel like we kind of normalize the tragedy part, as in, like, well, so they cheated on you. You either get the friends of like, oh, you should leave them alone, or it's like, well, don't let that be the end of the relationship, or everyone does it, or everyone gets into the argument, or everybody yells, everybody has these erratic emotions that go all over the place. And to a certain extent, they're not lying, but the way we kind of like talk about it always concerns me, as in, like, why aren't we having a little bit deeper conversations, as in, like, look, we can understand that this is an emotional response, but we have to also say out loud that response is not appropriate and it's unhealthy. It never really goes like that far.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point. People don't have those deeper conversations around it, because something you said earlier that made me think of this. A lot of people don't know what love is without tragedy, because they've never experienced love without tragedy and issues. A lot of it comes from, like, your home lifestyle. How many people grew up seeing a mom and dad, like, genuinely love each other, not chastise each other, not tear each other down? Most people kind of grew up in a single parent home. At least from my generation, most of them, or their parents are separated. So they see dad one way, mom another way, one setting, another setting, things like that. Most people probably haven't seen healthy love without chaos. So after a while, a lot of it becomes connected or associated, as we would say, right? Like, if they have this extreme reaction, they must really love me. Matter of fact, that's sometimes the barometer that people have, or the measurement that people have to measure how much somebody loves them, is if they can get an extreme reaction out of them.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, matter of fact, I'll give you an example. I was just talking about this earlier today. You know how Tank redid Maxwell's Woman's Worth?
I did not know that. Now I feel like I have to look for this.
No, it's actually, he's kept the same lyrics. I should be crying, but I just can't let it show.
It's actually a Kate Bush song.
I did not know that.
That's okay.
I did not know that. But in that song, what Tank is saying is that he's afraid, he's scared because she's not reacting to him cheating. Like, he's saying, cry, so I know that, I'm trying to remember the lyrics. He's basically begging her to please cry. Let me know you cry, because it lets me know you care. Without you crying, we all know, like, that means you checked out, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people, not just that example, but they'll do things when you're a little bit younger. They'll do things and be like, okay, I got okay, you really do care for me, because that extreme reaction was there. It's those negative extreme reactions that let people know this person cares, versus everyday common reactions of, like, I love you, I miss you, you look nice today, things like that. I think that people are so used to seeing love and chaos together that they equate, unless I see a chaotic or an extreme reaction, I can't tell if this person loves me.
Okay, random fact. I had to
that
out
is
there.
going to be real. I'm telling you right now.
It should be, but it's going to be. But random fact. Okay, you know me. I am the keeper of useless information. It's funny how, when Maxwell recorded that song and when Tank recorded that song, it took on a different meaning than the actual original recording of the song. Do you know what the actual original recording of the song actually is talking about?
No, what's about?
So Kate Bush wrote the song for a movie called She's Having a Baby, starring Kevin Bacon. And in the movie, she wrote the song specifically for the scene where the husband or the father finds out that there was complications in delivery. So if you listen to the lyrics of the song, she wrote it from the perspective of the father having to really kind of process that, oh my God, something happened to my wife, but also something happened to my baby. In that space and time between where he didn't know necessarily what the outcome was going to be. And I didn't even really realize that until Maxwell recorded his version. Then all of a sudden, because, I'm geeky, I Googled the lyrics and it's like Kate Bush. And then I saw an interview where she did it. She was like, no, they asked me to write a song for this movie where, like, this man is in the waiting room and they come out and they tell him that his wife and his baby had complications. And I had to write from a perspective, like, I wonder what that would be like for a man. And here we get this song that everyone sings, and it just takes on a different. I love the fact it takes on a different meaning every time someone else records it.
Yeah, I mean, everything's going to take on a different meaning because it's a different perspective of the person or the artist that's performing it. And I really mean that because you're right. Maxwell met it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in a sense of the value of a woman. Mm-hmm. Tank met it in, you're not crying. That means you're really done with me.
Yeah.
Same course, just a different meaning. And that's literally, using that as a segue, that is literally how two different perspectives of the same situation is the same thing in a relationship, right? Men look at relationships differently than women. Women look at relationships differently than men.
Facts.
Everybody's bringing their past experiences into the relationship. But at the end of the day, to your other point, I do think that a lot of people grow up in a household where there may be love there, but there's chaos there. And people associate the two to be connected in some weird way. Because what we were talking about also was weaponizing of people's emotions.
Yeah.
And I think that's tough.
It's awful.
Yeah, it's
well, I guess we could,
because you're weaponizing vulnerability. Let me just say that.
Yeah. Well,
you're weaponizing vulnerability.
Oh no, you're right. Well, okay. So let me ask this: how real do we get on this podcast? As real as we want to get.
As real as you feel comfortable with being.
Well, we're gonna do that.
You can be as comfortable. Hey, always go with what you're comfortable with.
I 100% agree with that because even to this day, at the big old age of 36, I still don't necessarily fully understand or grasp, not necessarily how to get into a relationship, but how to maintain a healthy relationship.
Really?
Yeah, and I won't go into too much detail because you were there.
Honest moment.
To your point, it's also because I recognize a big chunk of it was the fact that growing up, at least for us, and this isn't to blame any of our parents, that was not an example. When you and I came into the world, we were kind of at the tail end of a marriage.
Yeah, I barely remember our parents being together.
That's because they weren't. By the time we came into.
So my memory is accurate.
So by the time we came into our consciousness, they were already separating. It's just that they weren't telling us that. Sleeping in separate bedrooms.
Even when we lived on Maryland Avenue?
Even when we lived on Maryland Avenue. No, Maryland Avenue they weren't. But when we moved into the apartments over there, not too far from Eastover, separate rooms, and then when we moved into the apartment,
lived in apartments over near Eastover?
Not too far from Eastover, yeah.
What was I doing back then?
I don't know, but we lived in one that had a hill, and Granddad was living with us. But I'm sorry, going down memory lane.
I thought Granddad was living with us at French Street.
No.
Then I got those memories all backwards.
Oh, so go ahead. We'll talk about that offline.
Yeah, I got the memories all backwards. Go right ahead.
But I will say we came in at the end of a marriage. And so there wasn't necessarily that example of like, well, what does it mean to work out conflict? What does it mean to really be in love? Because at that point, we were seeing two people fall out of love. And we were seeing two people who had a difficult time navigating conflict with each other, to where as though even if it felt a little uncomfortable, it was still just kind of like the norm. So with that, growing up with that, and the funny thing is when you're young, you don't really think too much about that. Because by the time they went their separate ways, I ain't gonna lie, it was just like, thank you. This is the wisest decision you guys have ever made. Still didn't really process that, just kind of left it the way it was. But then as I got older, started dating, and I'll be 100% honest, because like you said earlier, we talked about it earlier, I'll put myself out there. I did not realize how much emotional dysregulation I had when it came to romantic relationships until I got into relationships, and I did exactly what it is that you said, weaponized.
Yeah, I could agree to have an emotional dysregulation when we were growing up.
Can y'all explain emotional?
Okay, so emotional dysregulation, when I say that, I'm talking about the fact that oftentimes my emotions would get so heightened and the response would just be so outlandish and not necessary and unhealthy to the situation.
Yeah, it's a inability to re-regulate your emotions back to a healthy base.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if your negative emotions are -10 and your positive emotions are +10 and 0 is base, people who have emotional dysregulation, they go from -1 to -9.
Exactly.
And then they stay there for a little bit. Or they go from +1 to 9, +9, and then they stay there. There's no in between. It doesn't slide back and forth like people who are able to navigate their emotions. It just jumps to the extremes and then it hovers, and it takes a little bit to kind of come back to base. But the issue with that is you usually come back to base after fallout. Like when you took it a little too far.
And you realize, oh God,
yes,
dang it,
it's kind of like you was like,
to you and I
dang
just said
it,
this craziness.
I ain't mean to take it that far.
Exactly.
I can see you really hurt right now, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, see, like that. And the weird thing is this. I knew it, but I didn't know it. And as time went by and I wasn't really trying to face or explore it, the dysregulation when I was triggered, or more importantly, when I perceived that I was hurt or I was whatever, violated, whatever it was, it just continued to go to these extreme levels. It just didn't make any sense. Until, and I don't want to get into too much detail, until like this one big incident occurred where it was just like, oh my God, I'm toxic. I weaponize. I'm emotionally dysregulated. I'm all those things that I was trained not to be, or I was trained to tell people, you need to leave this person alone. But I didn't really recognize it. More importantly, maybe I didn't really want to recognize it. But to your point, now being in a healthier space, and, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I think every day is an intentional act of trying to be in a healthy space. But being in a healthier space and kind of looking at those things with more emotional regulation, I could call myself out and say, like, if you talking about weaponizing, that was me. As in, you would tell me something in an all down moment, or like, you know, we're relaxed, we chill, and then let something happen to where it's like, I feel as though you're playing in my face or you disrespecting me. Then whatever it was that you told me, now all of a sudden becomes something to throw at you.
Yeah, weaponizing is a defense mechanism. The only reason that someone, I'm not going to make it a blanket statement, a reason why most people will probably weaponize something is because you feel like it's the only thing you have to defend yourself in that moment, right?
That part.
You know, like you feel like your hands are cuffed, so you just use your words in an aggressive manner to try to hurt somebody. So weaponizing is definitely a defensive mechanism in the face of feeling, because you keep using this word, violated, hurt, disrespected. Disrespect's powerful emotion, causes all types of stuff. But what I was going to say was, you said you didn't recognize it in yourself. Yeah, I would give you the grace you deserve. Most people who, and emotional dysregulation isn't a disorder, for everybody to know. It's not a it's not a mental health disorder. But a lot of people struggle with regulating their emotions. It's just a term to help you understand what you're seeing where you're seeing it. A lot of people don't recognize it because you're not the bad guy in your own story. Yeah. Like, you know your intentions. Think about it. If you're doing it from a position of being violated, that means that you were attacked. So therefore, in the midst of now, granted, looking back after years of working on yourself, or anyone working on themselves looking back, you can go, okay, yeah, maybe I was wrong in that moment. But
I was dead as wrong.
Right, yeah. But in that moment, though, people who are struggling with this concept, they don't realize it because they feel like they were attacked. I'm the victim. You need to suffer. And in my righteousness, my righteous indignation, I'm going to go ahead and use the weapons that I have in front of me. So I say that to say that weaponizing it is tough. It's really tough. But usually when people are and I'm not saying that it's okay, but usually when somebody is weaponizing something that you said, or your emotions against you, it's because they feel like that is the only way they can get back at you. So in that regard, they feel like this is the only way I can defend myself, regardless of, and I always tell everybody that's more of a them thing than a you thing.
100%.
Yeah, because you might not, or you might have. Well, you might have done something. You might have done something, but you might not have done something.
Well, I would say this. Looking back at it now, because from that particular situation, 7 years removed now. Every time I look back on it, at least now through this lens, I think to myself, it's a situation where I don't blame anyone really but myself, because even at those points where I felt whatever it was I was feeling, whether I felt violated, whether I felt disrespected, whether I felt neglected, the best thing to do would have been, one, to explain to the person and just explain, like, look, this isn't a relationship for me, or this isn't going to work out, whether it's because I feel that way and that's actually the case, which looking back on it, that wasn't always the case. Or whether it was just a situation where like that was just all in my head. The point was, I look back at it now and I take full responsibility for it, because every step of the way that I felt that way, I had the option of leaving, but for some reason, I was just so emotionally tied into the situation. I was just so emotionally invested. And I look back now, and I call a spade a spade. That emotional investment, even though I did genuinely care about the person, that emotional investment really was just, in my opinion, low self-esteem.
It could have been. I can see why you would say that, Keith. Because a lot of times I would imagine that people tend to identify themselves by the things they surround themselves with and the people they surround themselves with. Like if I was asking somebody, like, how, tell me a little bit about yourself. First thing they're going to tell me is their job. That's the first thing they're going to tell me.
Well, at least if you're in D.C., they will.
Yeah, you're going to tell me your job.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. All right, child of God, but you're going to tell me your job. Fair enough. So, like, some people tie their sense of self to the relationship that they're in. And also, sometimes people just don't want to feel... Let me pivot from that thought and say this. People underestimate how powerful emotions are.
Oh, 1,000%.
I have a mindset that your emotions are what bring you to therapy. The thinking is the problem, yes. But it's your emotions that drive you to therapy. There is this beauty in sadness. There's this anchoring in pain. That's why, like, I find myself explaining to people sometimes that when you go through a breakup, people often are like, I'm grieving. They start listening to R&B music because you're grieving the loss of what was and what could have been. But also, I've had clients share, like, the grieving is all they have left of the person. Like, my grief is all I got. They're gone. Like, it's the only thing that, I get, the memories and everything else. They hold on to that for a little bit because they're clawing at it because they still have hope. I say that as the segue to the main point of emotions are that powerful. So if it is an esteem thing, like you said, there are people out there who are in relationships where their partner feels that esteem void, the emotions that they bring.
Thank you for saying that. Because... And yes, a therapist who goes sees a therapist. Because in therapy, that's really what it boiled down to. Was the fact that, okay, so what is it that this relationship is feeling within yourself that you feel as though you can't feel without the relationship? And that's a very uncomfortable question to have to think about. But one that I'm extremely thankful for, because what it forced me to do, and still forcing me to do, is kind of really look inward for things. As in... external things, put it this way, and I don't make this all about me because it's just not what this is, but using myself as an example, I will be 100% honest and say that probably about 70% of the things that I've done that people just applaud me on or just like, oh, that's so wonderful, external things to fill a void. I think I said this in the first season of the podcast, as in I recognize that in the void, there's always going to be the part of me that's going to push myself to go as far as I possibly can go in external things, because there's always, it's starting to mute more. A voice in the back of my head is kind of like, it's still not quite there yet, or still, and the language has changed. Before, it was a voice that'd be like, nah, you ain't that good. Nah, stop. Trash. Now it's just more so kind of like, you're still not quite there yet. And I have to be very cautious of that, because that will go into almost every domain of my life: professional, academic, romantic, familial. There's always a case of just kind of like doing and doing and doing more to kind of prove something to myself or kind of feel something within myself. But I would say for the first time in my life, it's interesting to be in this place and do the work that we're doing, to where as though I am kind of leaning more inward and kind of like, well, what do you want to do? What do you enjoy doing? What does it mean to kind of spend time with yourself? Hence why over the summer, if you probably saw me posting pictures of the garden. Why? Because the garden came from a place of like, well, I want to learn how to garden, and it was phenomenal. Growing things.
See that. If I could see that in anybody, that's why I kept saying when you said I could see that in anybody, because I think a lot of times people don't know how to turn inward. That takes a lot of strength and courage to turn inward, to even recognize that there's a void there. And I can relate to that. I've told you that. I went ahead and got this PhD. It got rid of my imposter syndrome for the field of mental health. Yes. But I was immediately looking for the next thing. What's the next thing?
Right.
Is it good enough? I don't know if it's good enough. Am I one of the best? I don't know if I'm one of the best. I gotta find out if I'm one of the best out here to ever do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see why there's always that chasing everything, because there is if people are trying to surround themselves with material things, that is an indicator, or external rewards, that is an indicator that there is a void there. So then what do people do? They throw themselves into their church, into their job, into their relationships. That becomes their identity. And also, little brother, another thing that you brought up is like, what is it that you find in this relationship that you can't find outside of it? I would imagine that a lot of people, a part of that void is loneliness. Like, we're at that age now where people are like, man, they ready to settle down. They want to get married. They want to have kids. Don't nobody want to die alone.
You know what the funny thing is?
What's that?
Before that, I'm not gonna lie, that was it. Now it's a case of I gotten so comfortable with just being by myself. That personally, when I think about like, well, we should be out there going out on dates, and it's a part of me that always pauses and like, but do we? We're good. We feel good.
There's two things I want to say. I'm gonna say the second part first. One thing I always tell people is this, and I stole it from Dr. Umar.
Oh gosh.
So, depending on when you break up with somebody, you should take at least a season to yourself. I always say that for every year that you with somebody, you should take one season. That's just me. I agree with his assessment on that one because I've helped a lot of people in therapy. I always tell them I wouldn't be too quick after this long-term relationship to rush into another one, because you don't know how the stuff that's left over is going to show up. And usually about 90% of the time, it's a 9 out of 10 time, they go, Dr. B was right. I rushed in a little too soon, ready to get with somebody now. Now they done ghosted, like they're hurt. That season off gets you an opportunity to fully grieve. And I also say recognize that void. Like that relationship ending took something with it. It does. There's no way around it. You end in a long-term relationship, a year or more. Let's just use that. I'll use that as an example. A year or more is a long-term relationship. If they leaving, they took something with you. A little bit of you with them. That the bare minimum is memories. Yeah. Right. You need time to recognize how those memories and those emotions will show up in your day-to-day life. That's why I say take a season. Approximately 3 months. Go out. If you do it in the wintertime, that sucks. Sorry, that sucks. Because it's cold outside. But you get to go out and drive around those places y'all used to go. Yeah. See how you might feel about being there without that person. Walking around your apartment or your house without that person being there. Finding little things that they left around that you didn't know was there. That's why I say you should take a season off for when you're going through a breakup. The other thing I wanted to say, Keith, oh man, it got away from me when I was talking about the season thing.
It's okay.
What were you talking about before I said?
No, I was just saying, like, now I'm in a place where it's like, I won't use the word loneliness. I'm in a place now where like I just like being.
I remember
by myself.
now. No, thank you so much. I remember now. I think that's a good and a dangerous thing at the same time.
I can believe that.
I think it's good to be comfortable with yourself. I think it's dangerous because people don't understand how subtly it becomes a defense mechanism. To where now you're so used to being alone that you're a little worried or timid or afraid to engage in another relationship because you done built yourself back up. Yeah. That you scared to get attached, to be torn back down. I think being able to be comfortable with yourself is a beautiful thing. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It is a good thing. Everybody should do it. Yeah. But I've seen it work against people's goals sometimes. Whereas like that last relationship did a number on you to where it took you a while to build yourself back up. Now I'm going to dip out. I'm not saying ignore red flags. But sometimes you got to go ahead and review the play a little bit. Make sure you saw what you saw and communicate it. That's why I say it's a beautiful thing, but it can be a dangerous thing. There is a point where too much of a good thing is bad for you. Too much of being okay with yourself can too turn into being a bad thing, because are you willing to re-engage with being in a relationship again?
Whenever I hear that question, it's always a big dramatic pause, because there's a part of me it's like, I'm so comfortable.
Right? Yeah. It's comfortable being
so
on your own.
comfortable.
Yeah, it's predictable. It's less stress.
Exactly. It costs less.
Oh my God.
It costs so much less.
Man, it
right?
don't it?
But not even just finance definitely, but also it costs less in the sense of peace of mind.
Peace
it
of
costs less
mind.
in space. It's
Space.
just it's a case of just kind of getting home in it, and it's like you feel like you're at home. But to your point, I guess and also again, I take things by case basis. To your point, I can also understand that could be detrimental for someone if it's a case of, hey, you actually do know deep down inside you want to go back out there and be in a relationship. It's something completely different if you're someone that's just kind of like, nah, I'm good. I actually feel fulfilled, and I don't really feel the need to actually, because there's some people who exist in that space. Like, I don't feel the need to actually be in a romantic relationship. I have other fulfilling relationships, and I feel pretty good.
I don't believe that.
I do.
I don't. This is where we're going to disagree then. It's a rare moment.
Because, again,
I don't believe that.
Case by case basis, I think that for some people, if it's a situation where, let's say it was a long, stressful relationship. Mm-hmm. And let's just say you get to a place where, like, you were in it for 20, however, 30 years. Mm-hmm. I could imagine getting to a place where it's just kind of like, I don't think I want to revisit this whole thing about being with someone in that way or that romantic sense, to where it's just kind of like, I've had that. I'm done with that chapter. I just want to kind of focus on other things in my life that maybe I haven't had the opportunity to focus on.
I can respect that person's saying that. I don't believe it, though.
Why not?
Human beings, genetically, spiritually, socially, were not designed to be alone.
You're talking about in a romantic sense?
No, in a romantic sense, yes. In a romantic sense.
Gotcha.
No, I don't think anyone wants to be alone. I think a response like that to me, not to invalidate that person's world, you're choosing to be alone because you're thinking it's a place of safety. But I don't think you really want to do it, because if you were able to be with the person that hurt you and they vowed not to hurt you again, or if they never hurt you at all, you'd have been fine. I think that all human beings want to be with somebody because life is designed to be shared with someone else. Life is designed to be a burden carried by two people. That's not just a philosophical statement. That's even a mental health statement. Experience shapes the brain. Experience shapes how you interact with other people. One thing we always talk about in therapy, social support system.
Yeah.
As you get older, you know what happens as you get older? If you don't end up in a relationship, your friends do.
Yeah.
And your friends are actively seeking a relationship. And then when they find somebody, guess what happens to your support system sometimes? They have other priorities.
Yeah.
They're looking for someone that they can, lay down next to, build a life next to, grow old with. I'm not saying that person who says that statement doesn't believe it. And I can respect why they say it. No, I'm not saying that they don't believe it. I'm just saying I don't believe that you truly want to walk the rest of this existence by yourself.
Well, I put you this way. I think that it just depends. We're talking about social supports. I think it just depends on where they rather spend those energies when we're talking about relationships. If it's a situation where it's like, okay, I have a fulfilling relationship with friends, fulfilling relationships, whatever, social circle, whatever, familial circles. I'd rather spend more energy focusing on that and be fulfilled in that capacity.
That has a time limit to me, though. I mean, cut you off. Like that's not going to fill the void of an intimate partner relationship.
Well, I think, put it this way, it probably won't, but I think that when we do it that way, we're kind of saying that, well, this particular relationship is more important than this particular relationship, or holds more value, or should hold more value in one's personal life than these other relationships.
I'm not going to say it should. I'm going to say this is my thought process. An intimate partner relationship at a certain point in a human being's life holds more value than other relationships. And I'm saying I'm pulling that information from what society shows us. Because the example I gave you earlier, right? I love my best friends like brothers. But I also recognize that I'm not the priority. Their family and their wives are. So that relationship, that intimate partner relationship, is more important than the friendship. I can only respect it that way.
But see, that's the thing. That's important if that's something that is important to you, if that's a part of like the biggest thing that you value. What I'm saying is some people to where so that particular thing or that particular category, that's not the most important thing. Because if it was, to your point, it'd be a situation, they'd be feeling it. So all that energy gets directed towards other relationships.
I think people want to feel it. They struggle with doing it. So learned helplessness kicks in and they divert that energy elsewhere.
I say it's a 50-50 split. Because I say it's a 50-50 split.
You think that there's I'm not saying you're wrong. It's not a gotcha question. It's an honest question. You think there are people in this planet who genuinely want to grow old and pass into greater glory by themselves?
Well, that's the thing. They're not doing it by themselves. If they already still have,
I mean, without an intimate partner. I know you can say they have their friends.
Yeah. And
their
family.
friends ain't gonna be there all the time. It's different when you're in a.
Yeah.
It's different when you have your wife, your husband, your partner with you every day.
Yeah.
I firmly believe no one who came into this world or who has ever been in love just was like. Now keep in mind this is a result of probably of a bad relationship, so I don't want to dismiss their reality, but I don't think that they truly wanted to get to the place where they were like, I just don't want to be with nobody no more. So that's why I laid it as a foundation to go back to my question. Do you think that there are people in this world who truly do not want a relationship, who've always felt that way potentially, and they're okay with dying without that?
I do.
Okay.
Because I put you this way. When I think, one thing that therapy has taught me is this, is that when you're dealing with people, and particularly when you're dealing with a lot of people, there is a gamut of thought, human experience, even to a certain extent evolution, right? Because I know we can say some things, we can say like, by nature, by design, human beings will be X, Y, and Z, but there's always those phenomena, right? Or those anomalies, I should say, to where it doesn't necessarily quantify. For instance, I love when people say like, well, there's only two genders, so that whole trans thing doesn't make any sense. But then I always have to point out to people, well, first off, gender is a social construct. You mean to say there's two sexes, but then how do you explain asexual people? I mean asexual people.
You mean are you saying hermaphrodites?
We don't say hermaphrodites anymore.
What's the correct word? I'm sorry.
The intersex. Sorry,
I did not know it got an update. I apologize.
I'm saying that's okay. No, intersex people, right? So there's always anomalies and variations of something. To where, so for me personally, I could never feel comfortable in saying, in an umbrella sense, that this is a need, or this person, or all humans want, because the reality situation is there's always anomalies. And then to your point, you're right. Sometimes it is a situation where people kind of normalize based off of whatever it is they've gone through, situations, whatever life is presented to them, where like they made their peace of where things are, how they may end up. But I do honestly believe there are some people out there to where it's kind of like, in their evolution, companionship isn't necessarily, at least romantic companionship, isn't necessarily something they were gunning for. Yeah,
I'm gonna let that air out. I don't want to be dismissive. I think that you might have grown to that point. No one, it's very, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm not saying it's not possible at all. But it's very rare to come across somebody that since day one's been like, I never want to get married, never want to have no, or not say I never want to get married. I never want to be in a relationship. It's very rare, I think that people grow to that place, but I don't think they really want to stay in that place.
So here's an interesting question. What are your thoughts about people who say they don't want to have children?
People who don't want to have children?
Is that more so rooted in the situation to where as though, that's just some sort of adverse experience, or situational type of thing, to where as though they just accept the fact they're not going to have children? Or are there genuinely people in the world who come into the world not wanting to have children?
My opinion about people who don't want to have children is not a bad one. You just don't want to have them, but that doesn't mean you don't want a partner, though. So you might not want children, but that don't mean you don't want to lay up next to somebody and do life with somebody.
I would disagree.
Oh, okay.
I would disagree.
I do not think that I don't equate having children to, wanting to be in an intimate relationship. I equate wanting to be next to somebody and do life with somebody is what that is. So them not wanting to have children, to me, doesn't mean that you don't want to have somebody. Like everybody even somebody who has a roster, they have a consistent number one on their roster that's above everybody else that they spend the majority of their time with. Yeah. Everybody has that. Yeah. They might not stop talking to multiple people. Yeah. But they're not going to stop talking to that person probably. Or if they did, it would tear their little heart up.
Well, the reason why I brought that up was because of this. Again, I think there's always variations in case-by-case situations.
There's variations. Yeah.
Because even in that scenario, I think to myself, so would you tell people where their focus was always, I knew I was going to have a kid, and I did have a kid, and I wanted a kid. The partner, not so much.
When you, I lost the question. And by the way, before you say that, I keep in mind what I'm telling everybody is this: I believe that no one doesn't want to be in a relationship. I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I'm telling you I just don't believe it. And just because I don't believe it doesn't mean that you are not correct. You can say in your heart of hearts, I know I don't want to be this way. And I would never tell you the way you're looking at reality is wrong. I just think in my head that just doesn't align with everything that I've learned. That's all. But to your point, what was the scenario again?
So the scenario is for people where like they know definitely all their life they're going to be somebody's parent, but they didn't necessarily want to be in a relationship with somebody. Mm-hmm. My point is bringing that up is saying that I do believe that there are just instances for people where it's a case of
what
like
Tyler Perry movie you pulled that from? I've never heard nobody say I'm gonna be a parent, but I don't want to be in a relationship with nobody.
There's a lot of single parents who never really had any desire to be in a relationship, but they knew they wanted kids.
Man, that's. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I haven't heard that.
There's a lot of people.
Correction. Let me say it this way. I might have heard it in passing. I think I'm thinking about among my friend group that I keep around, the people I hang around. I can't recall hearing that because usually I hear people say like they don't want to have kids unless it's with the right one.
Put you this way, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it does also kind of boil down to culture circles. Because for me personally, the circles I hang around with, it's a situation where I will hear people say, I'm not necessarily someone who wants to be in a relationship or even have a partner in that regard, but I do know I want to be someone's parent.
All right, well, we're going to wrap this episode up, but I hope they have that same energy when they 60. I'm going to give this. I appreciate my clients who are 68 and above because one thing I've learned from them, granted, these are just their experience, so it doesn't got to be yours, that they always say this: if you love that person, tell them now. They always say, you don't want to get to my age and get stuck with the what if. Yeah. The other thing is, this is what they all say: share your life with somebody. It sucks to get to this age and be alone. Yeah. I just want to throw that out there. So that's why I said that line, like, if you feel that way, I can respect you feel that way.
Yeah.
I don't agree with you. And we could talk about it on another episode, but I'm not going to tell you how you should. It's not me telling you how you should live your life.
Yeah, I say share your life with your congregation, share your life with your grandchildren, share your life with your family, share your life with your friends, share your life with every community you build.
All right, man, if that's what you want, if that's what people want to do, I'm not here to tell them how they should live their life. I just think that the science and the psychology, I can debate that it leans on my side.
I can also debate that the psychology and the science also kind of looks at a certain subset of people with a certain set of experience, a certain mindset.
Mm-hmm. The majority of the human race?
Well, again, I'm always curious to know when we're throwing out certain research who exactly they're exploring.
We say that the majority of the human race doesn't, by and large, end up in an intimate relationship.
So I'm not saying the majority doesn't, but what I am saying though is this. So let's say, are we also exploring different cultures, how they view getting older? As far as like, is
I'm talking about being in a relationship, not getting old.
No, I'm talking about, that's what I'm talking about. As you get older, because one of the biggest things is sharing your life with somebody, particularly as you mentioned, getting older. But are we exploring different cultures in regards to like how they view being in romantic relationships, or if it's a situation to where so even within those cultures, people even value romantic relationships? Are we looking at communities where it's more so a situation of like, as long as it's about communal connections, as in actually being able to feel connected to other people who you aren't necessarily trying to be with romantically?
I think that what you just described in that example would be a subset. I don't have the data to support it. I'd be curious to know which cultures. But I would feel like by and large, as a human species, though, across cultures, across geographic regions.
And I'm not disputing that. But what I'm saying, though, is that if there's always an outlier, then there's also a situation where you have to acknowledge that outlier and say that may not be something that everybody wants. But to your point, you did say the majority.
Nah, I would still even challenge that. It is a basic human response to want to connect with people.
Correct. And people don't have to do that in the romantic sense.
I would even challenge that. that. We got to wrap it up. But I would even challenge that. I would have to look it up. Now I'm curious to go look it up. I would even challenge that there's a basic genetic component that pulls you to want to connect to somebody intimately. I would challenge that as well. I feel like everything that I've learned.
I was going to say something funny to that.
Yeah, I feel like everything that I've learned. Keep in mind, I don't have any research to prove it. I just feel like everything that I've learned, or it could be my own belief system. Because, like I said earlier, I don't believe it, right? Because that could be a bias just tripping up right now too. But I feel like there's a literal hard science genetic component to why human beings are drawn to a connection, intimate partner connection, whether not even just with one person, even if it's a polygamous relationship.
So here's my funny line to answer that question: orgasm.
Now, I don't think it's just that, Keith. I think that is a byproduct of joy from sex.
Yeah.
I think that there's a human desire for connection at a deeper level with other people, whether it's monogamous or polygamous. I do think that if I looked it up, I would find it. I feel like I would actually find that there's a neurological component to it. But because we going,
We keep going. We keep going.
Yeah,
We keep going.
That's the first time we ever disagree. We should disagree more because
It's good conversation. It's good conversation.
I don't think y'all want none of y'all. Let's be for real. If they called you back right now, you might entertain it. You might change your ways. I don't know if you will.
It depends which one.
See?
It depends which. I'm saying it depends which one.
So
So, like, comment, subscribe, tune in every other week for